Nicholas has been a friend of young people from the international spaces, and he's here with us. He's in the Kenya Regional Office. So everybody, my name is Dolphin Magero. I'm a youth within the climate change space, and today we're going to have discussion about how to enhance access and transparency of youth climate finance flows, because we know that we've been making so much noise about meaningful youth engagement. But how can we really have meaningful youth engagement without young people having access to climate financing for their meaningful youth engagement? So when we started to discuss, to look into how young people can access issues of climate, how young people can access climate financing, we know that not just within climate change space, the issue of transparency and accountability really comes into play, because even within the agricultural sector, one of the issues facing young people is the lack of financing to basically upscale their agricultural activities. So that issue of mistrust, let's call it as a mistrust, by, of course, the lending, the people with the financing towards young people, because they feel young people are unstable, young people are so many things. So we are here to discuss about how we can enhance access to access and transparency of youth climate finance flows, because money is not just about writing a good proposal. It's also about, does the donor trust you enough to put, their money inside your project, basically inside your pocket. So if a donor trusts you, so writing a good proposal is the first step. The next thing is building the trust. And I think it would be really unfair to say that there has not been resources channeled to support young people, because if that were true, then young people, first of all, would not even be here, would not have implemented some small activities on climate change, because we see young people on capacity building, young people on TV, young people who've come here from all over Africa, from all over the world. So today, I have a very diverse panel of speakers. So our theme is the multi-level youth climate finance governance, because when you talk about transparency and financing, it also comes down to a governance issue, basically. So because we have existing avenues that young people can tap into at each and every level. So that's why we have our speaker from the Yungo Finance Bucket Working Group. So Kuntai Matilda basically is a youth from the International Youth Climate Movement. So young people are coordinated at the global level by Yungo. So Matilda will have a chance to speak. Next to her, we have, of course, our own Christine Ogola. So Christine is the national coordinator for IKE. IKE is the African Youth Initiative on Climate Change. So she's going to give us insight about young people engagement at the national level. How is financing flowing for youth at the national level? Then we have next, we have Isaac Oindo. Isaac has been a youth advocate for quite some time. Isaac is also currently a program officer at Young Women Christian Association. So he's going to give us insight on how entities that deal with women and youth at the very grassroots level basically are accessing financing if there are opportunities and gaps. Then next we have, of course, Michael Haduyu. Michael Haduyu is at the African level. He currently works with the Africa Youth Commission. So he's best strategically to give us the African focused insight, basically what are the existing opportunities at the Africa level. So ladies and gentlemen, karibuni sana. I take this opportunity to give my speakers, each one of them, a chance to introduce themselves, because they know themselves better, what they do, and how their work relates to climate financing. So we'll start with Mr. Michael Haduyu. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, colleagues, and I'm glad to be here. My name is Haduyu Nyongesa. I'm dropping Michael because that I was given in church. But I'm going with my African names now because I've been introduced as being at the African level. You have to go with the flow. But I just want to say that I come from the Africa Youth Commission, and it's an organization that was founded in 2017, and it has presence in 46 countries in Africa, currently leading a project called the African Activists for Climate Justice, ASCJ abbreviated. And the project is implemented in 8 countries: South Africa, Mozambique, Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, and Senegal. And as the project lead, I'm charged with ensuring that at least I empower young people to ensure that at the end of the 5 years of the project, we have a climate movement of young people fighting for climate justice at their own level. I'm glad to be here personally as a climate change expert in following climate finance and policy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Isaac Oindo. I work with Young Women Christian Association of Kenya as a program officer in charge of climate change projects. One, we implement climate geared towards fostering inclusion in climate resilient developments, but as well as a project that is looking at enhancing the participation of women, youth, and the marginalized communities in post-Paris climate dialogue processes. I'm looking forward for this conversation, and I know young people are at the center of setting the agenda around climate finance that will help them to realize climate resilient developments across the board. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christine Ogola. I am the National Coordinator of the African Youth Initiative on Climate Change, Kenya chapter. So basically what AIC does is capacity build young people to ensure that they have the capacity, or rather the resource, to follow climate finance in terms of tracking, in terms of ensuring that the government or the different departments at the government create an enabling policy in terms of, do we have enabling institutional frameworks? Do we have enabling regulations for young people to access finance? And I think we will delve more on that as we move along. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kudzanai Matuda, and I'm from Zimbabwe. I wear so many hats. So today I'll go with Yungo. I'm part of the Finance and Markets Working Group. Basically, this group is to mobilize the youth and provide a platform that encourages the youth to lead, join, and showcase so that there is effective and innovative actions towards accessing climate finance for the young people. So as we go along with the discussion, I'll do more on what we do exactly.
Thank you. Thank you very. You can hear me? Okay. Hello. Okay, you can hear me? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. For those joining us, Karibuni Sana, we have more seats, more space. So in that regard, I think we'll take a bottom-up approach, because Isaac work basically at the grassroots level, the sub-national level. So if Isaac can just begin the discussion. Isaac, basically, you work with women and youth, basically at the very grassroots level. And we know that Kenya recently revised its Climate Change Act, basically, and there was a proposal to include young people within the National Climate Change Council. For those who don't know, the National Climate Change Council is going to oversee the governance of Kenya's national climate change, of the National Climate Change Fund, which has been established to support climate change activities in the country. So Isaac, from where you sit and from your engagements and from looking at the international, the national discussions, do you think that the voices of the young women that you work with in the grassroots level are going to be captured, considered within this proposed youth position within the National Climate Change Council? So Isaac, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dolphin. That is a critical question, because the Climate Change Act 2016 was amended, and now we have the Climate Change Act 2023, right? Which is now the governing law. As you put it, there was a proposal to have the youth being present in the council. I don't know how disappointed I am. This might not see the light of the day, because definitely the act is out and you've all read it. Dolphin, I would want to give some of the challenges, and even in relation to the enactment of the climate change law in Kenya. Basically, when we talk about climate finance, we look at two things: the access and also the transparency component. And we need to come in terms with what are the challenges that revolves around these two areas. You look at access, what are the challenges in relation to youth, women, and also the marginalized groups, who are also very key in this process. So we all agree that there is limited climate finance, and basically this has been a reason why most youths and most of the young people haven't developed so much in realizing climate resilient developments at the community level. The same with women. And what I've gathered from the engagement with these young people is, one, being that when you give reference to the adaptation gap report that is available, they are actually trying to tell us that issues of finance is one of the hindrance in the implementation. We also give reference to the IPPC report, that is the AR6 report, that is also telling us that we have some barriers to the achievement of the climate resilient developments by youth, and also the real actions on the ground. One, I tried to summarize some of these issues, and I think this will go to the discussion that we are going to have. One, we have aspect of capacity. It's still a problem. We talk about climate finance in an umbrella view. We don't understand basically what is it and where can we get it. So most of our youths still have really grappling with the issues of definition of climate finance, the sources and the formulas or the methodologies of accessing this climate finance. Two, there are really stringent measures in accessing climate finance in reference to GCF and also the Adaptation Fund, even the GEF. If I ask maybe among the participants that we have here today, you'll realize that most of them gave up long time ago, even trying to apply for some of these opportunities which are there. So stringent measures are one of the barriers that we have. You asked a question, and that's why I started from far, on the aspect of policy and enabling environment for the youth to access climate finance. So you realize that most of the policies have been in place, but still, we are still grappling with the issue of inclusion, and that is where the youth and women also come in. The fourth one, you mentioned it when you were introducing the agenda, trust. Do these donors, do they trust young people? That is the question. You will be asked the question of, you are a young person. They believe maybe we can't bring much to the table. And I think this is a serious issue that, if not well defined, if not well discussed, then we are going still to struggle with the access when it comes to climate finance. As I finalize on the barriers, Dolphin, the agenda setting is also one issue that we still have a problem with, and the conflict of interest. Recently, and someone challenged me in a meeting, that even if we have the Climate Change Act 2016, the revised one having the position of the youth and women, we are still going to struggle. Who is this person? Coming together and agreeing on one common agenda is a problem among the youths. So as we discuss and as we move forward, we are going to see on how to address some of these challenges. When I go to transparency, Dolphin, I think one thing that we need to agree on, and looking at the frameworks that we already have in place, is the aspect of MRV systems, monitoring, verification and reporting systems. I think this is also part of our National Climate Change Action Plan in Kenya, as you asked me to talk about the context of the Kenya as a country, and then also trickling down to the grassroots, where most of my work is based. So MRV systems, I remember in Kenya we implemented a project called Angaza, and most of you can resonate with this, under the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, which was actually looking at developing some tracking tool when it comes to climate finance. But again, the question comes, how many NGOs and how many civil society organizations have been reporting on the access to climate finance? How many have accessed and how much, and what are the interventions which are in place? So these are some of the questions that we still have, and I'm looking forward to diverging much into the conversation even as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isaac. Very interesting discussion. So since we're doing the bottom-up better economic approach, I'll jump right onto Christine. So Christine, Isaac has highlighted some of the challenges, existing issues within the national level, also affecting the grassroots level, issues of transparency. Christine is coordinating a national Kenyan youth movement. So Christine, what are some of the challenges? How are you that you encounter in trying to access climate financing for some of your initiatives like the LCOI? I know you're hosting the LCOI. And also, what are you doing as the leader of this national youth movement to position yourself, given that we will not have a youth sitting at the National Climate Change Council, which means that some opportunities that we're looking into will not be there. So how are you preparing your people, your organization, your group to be able to be strategically situated to access climate financing to support some of your activities? Christine?
Sorry. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Isaac, for highlighting on that. To me, I feel strongly that even if the finances, then it's not directly, young people cannot access it directly. We have, the long processes, the resources or documents that we're required to give to be able to access the research. So it kind of acts as a hindrance because a lot of youth movement, to be honest, they're not really structured in that way. And you get finances for young people or for a youth program. It's incorporated in a larger organization who then give young people that they directly work with to do the climate initiative work. But now where does that leave the grassroots young people who cannot access or who are not known to these organizations? So as AIC, what we do mostly is build capacity for young people, working with organizations, CSOs like YWCA, on enhancing youth capacity and draw them towards the direction of climate tracking, climate finance tracking, and contributing to development policies that offer enabling environment for them to access these finances as young people.
Thank you very much, Christine. That was quite elaborate. I'll jump over to Haduyu. We know that this summit has centered mostly on climate financing and mitigation and Article 6. And Haduyu, we know that our Climate Policy Initiative report highlights that on the global landscape of climate finance, about 95% of climate financing available goes to mitigation rather than adaptation. So Haduyu, in that regard, recalling that, of course, the FDB has launched the Africa Climate Change Fund. What do you think how do you think young people within the African context can leverage on the existing climate financing mechanisms, of course, that exist within the region, within the African continent, and also in light of the Africa Climate Change Fund? And what does this summit mean for African young people, given that Africa has been branded as your main agenda is adaptation? So what does it mean for young people, and how does it make you feel as an African youth? So how do you?
Thank you so much. And I want to start by saying that I want to disagree with the statement that Africa, our priorities are only adaptation. Let's be honest, if you are really struggling and money is coming from one sector, you have to align your objectives to see how you're going to gain out of mitigation. So I want us to change that narrative to be like, adaptation is our priority, yes, but mitigation is an opportunity. Because a lot of financing is coming through mitigation. So are we going to refuse money? Remember, energy access in Africa still remains at a rudimentary stage. It's so low. So if we cannot refuse money because it does not align with our priority, that's one. Two, for somebody to be classified to like their adaptation potential has been on the rise, what is required? What do you need so that at least you can adapt effectively to climate risks? Let's pick an example of the cyclone that hit Mozambique, whereby your house is swept, bridges are swept, infrastructure is swept. What kind of projects can you put in place to help you be resilient? And it goes back to one key thing that we are going, economic empowerment. And economic empowerment goes beyond climate discussions alone. And that's why I'm so happy when now our president talks about the new financial architecture. You can't rubbish it, but let's be honest, the achievement of the new financial architecture is also the achievement of your objective under adaptation. Because as young people of Africa, we should be looking at an alternative way of solution, because I think we have been hypnotized by the COP process, whereby we are, when you talk about access to finance, it's GCF, Adaptation Fund, JEF, List, Development, Climate Finance, all those things. And you talk with your mind already closed with the existing mechanisms. But there's a huge untapped potential called private sector financing. And I had an expert somewhere talking and saying that Africa does not have a special private sector or a broad private sector that can really, really support its effect. Who told you that we do not have private sector? Small as they are, they need to be resilient and they need to be empowered so that they can really be able to cope with the drought that we face all the time, floods that we face all the time, the cyclones that we face all the time, the expansion of ourselves, of the Sahara that we are doing. And that's why we should not rubbish the Great Green Wall. The achievement of the project really is good for all of us as Africans. That is one. Two, I know that Africa, we call Africa Union as a barking dog, a toothless, because it doesn't have like like the way EU is, because as we all know, EU member countries have ceded their power to EU. When they go to negotiate, they negotiate, and whatever decision that they agree upon is binding. But when EU goes to negotiate, it's not binding to all the 55 countries. So what should we do as Africa Youth? We should push for our presidents to give EU more power. And that means ceding part of our sovereignty to EU, so that when EU says that this is binding, then we agree, yes, we are going to align with the outcome of the discussion. But if EU is going to negotiate on oceans, and let's say a country like, which country is landlocked? Zambia, which is landlocked, says, that does not concern us. So that means we start thinking individualistic, so that when Zambia gets out of the room and goes to negotiate another deal that favors them, like on mining or something, yet the decision that EU needs is the support of all the 55 member countries, so that it's a strong position. Let's be honest, EU is our body. What if it fails, we've failed. If it succeeds, we've succeeded. So the new climate change strategy that I've developed 2020 to 2030, you should look at it. What objectives does it have for you as an African youth? So I will say, Dolphin, that the current new approach of Africa Climate Summit is an alternative voice, because as somebody senior told me that the climate summit is not a rubber stamping of the UNFCCC processes. It's an alternative way that Africa can engage with the outside world. And can we rally behind that? Can we say that Africa needs an alternative way of engaging? Because we are tired of the core process. Yes, we will keep going, because we need to negotiate with the rest of the world. But also at the same time, we need to strategize and strengthen our voice as Africans and tell them, in our summits that we've been having for Africa Climate Summit, this is our outcome. And this is the position that we are pushing for. If you're not going to align with it, then you are not going to be given permits to mine our resources for your own use. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aduyu. That was very elaborate. So we've heard from the grassroots, the national, the Africa. I'll go to the global level. So Matilda is part of the international youth climate movement called UNGO. And UNGO has the finance and market working groups. So UNGO has been very strong on the negotiations, the SBs, the UNFCCC, the COPS processes. So Matilda, I want to ask you to elaborate to our audience today. What are some of the opportunities that are within the UNGO finance and market working groups, and how can young people from all over, not just Africa, from all over the world, leverage on UNGO as a platform to advance some of their climate change agenda in terms of finance? And how can young people use that platform to lobby even for financing to come to young people? So Matilda, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, we share innovative and effective actions to ensure that young people participate actively in gaining climate finance for their different projects or different organizations. So as UNGO, the finance group, they hold an academy on climate finance, clearly elaborating on the different ventures, different avenues that a young person can be able to access climate finance. a lot of people say that it's too technical, the wording and stuff, but they've been trying to ensure that the language that speaks on climate finance is in a context that young people are able to understand, because we understand that a lot of young people do not want to associate themselves to climate finance because they don't understand most of the terms. So they've been running academies, capacity building workshops to ensure that young people are well capacitated and they know what they want in the climate finance. So Yungo works with a lot of young people internationally with diverse backgrounds. So that also helps young people. So because in Zimbabwe, I'm from Zimbabwe, there are also young people that are not part of Yungo that could also assist in ensuring that young people gain climate finance. So it's a collaborative effort of young people seeking their position in climate finance. So young people can leverage on the opportunities through education, through campaigns, and even there are some activists within Yungo that are also speaking on climate finance. So there could be too many technical terms, but you can work on what you know. It could be a national level, regional level, and then you come up to global level. So it's a collective effort of young people to learn on the effective actions that work within their nations and up to the global level on how young people can access climate finance.
Thank you very much, Matilda. I think we can open the floor to the rest of the audience if there are questions on some of the thoughts that our speakers have shared. So anyone with a question, or we can move to the next session, then take the questions at the end. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So my name is Tom Biko. I work with an alliance called Alliance for Land, Indigenous and Environmental Defenders, which is a global alliance. So my question, I agree with all the panelists that actually there is bureaucracy in accessing finance for climate action projects. And also nowadays there's this tendency of lack of transparency in awarding finance to organizations and groups that work on climate issues. So I wanted to ask you, in your own opinion, how can we work around ensuring that those grassroots organizations and youth groups at the grassroots level are able to equally access finance, climate financing from the donors? Because nowadays the stringent measures that are placed around accessing finance, if you are not well established, then it means, quote in quotes, you are not eligible to access this finance. And mostly these groups are still very young and growing. So how do we ensure that even those new groups are able to equally access finance as those well-established groups? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another question? Yes.
It's afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Faith. I'm a policy researcher and very passionate about youth and climate action. So mine, I don't think it's a question, but looking at the topic, why are we sugarcoating? We are talking about transparency, and I think there should be corruption there. Because let's just be honest with ourselves. Anyway, my comment was on this as youth groups, especially on the global platform and on the grassroots level. I just wanted to pose a challenge to all of us. When I look at everyone here, no one is growing younger, right? We are all growing older. Responsibilities are adding up. So as youth, how can we support each other? Because I know as Africans, we've grown up with this thing of unhealthy, I call it unhealthy competition. And it's unfortunate it starts from an early childhood. Let's just call it what it is. It goes up to the corporate levels. It gets in our schools, then in your adult life. Then instead of thinking of your lives and how you're going to impact positively your communities, you're thinking how you're going to pull each other down, and a lot of jealousy. So as young people, how are we going to tackle that? Are we going to support each other and grow older, happy, and have a happy society? Or we are still going to go on with this sad society, we are pulling each other down. Because let me be honest, majority of us, we've met in many youth forums, and this is the challenge. And again, that greediness. I know we are all struggling. Everyone wants to be there, successful and all that. But why take shortcuts and become a rich fool? Because I do support what our president said, for as much as many people are against it and saying that he said, but it's the truth of life. And looking at this transparency about climate finance, you're talking about money here. Money that is meant to help someone at the grassroots. Us who don't have water in Ukambani, how are we going to access this water? Because right now, majority of us, when you come to these forums, you talk a lot of English, but at the grassroots level, you need to be realistic when you're coming to have these conversations. We need this at the grassroots level. Like in Ukambani, us, we need water. I am here to look for water. I am just looking for water and also seed. And also I'm looking for land for our young people who don't have land, who can be able to access the finance and also lease it. So, just one challenge to all of you. Apart from just talking about all these fancy organizations and all that, what are you doing for your community as a young person? We are all leaders, right?
Yes, final one. We'll go through one more round of panelists, then come back to another. So I'll take the last two questions.
No, thank you so much for the discussions. Quite intriguing. And I like the ideas around mobilization of climate finance, the alternative ways. And Kadu is so brilliant of you to talk about prioritization of either adaptation or mitigation. Quickly, do you know any private sector financing for adaptation that has succeeded?
Final one, then we'll go to the next round. Kelly?
Thank you so much. Mine is to the different institutions that are seated before us. What are you doing to make sure that climate finance knowledge, structure, and skills are found in the grassroots? Because they don't know about the climate finance knowledge. They don't have it. So what are you doing in your different organizations to make sure that this knowledge reaches down there? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if my panelists would like to attack some of the questions as we go to round two of the panel discussion.
Thank you. I would want to start with the last question by Banda on what we are doing, right? I would want to just give examples of what we do at the national level as an organization. We took advantage of the Kisumu County Climate Change Act of 2020. There was a provision where from the NGO sector or the private sector, we would do the vetting of the climate change planning committees. You know very well now, the one wonderful thing that has ever happened for us as a country is to have a devolved finance systems in our counties. So we did the vetting and probably just to ensure that the youth are at the center of these particular planning committees and to ensure that the structures are properly in place in terms of the scorecards of the kind of projects that are going to run from those particular committees. So those are that's one example of how we are localizing the climate finance issues at the ground. But again, Biko asked a very good question on access to climate finance and the climate change structures. We all agree that there are a lot of stringent measures and access has been a problem. But as youths, I believe we have the opportunity and being backed by our policy and legal frameworks. I just learned this morning that there was a circular 13 of 2020 on reporting on climate finance from the private sector and also from the NGOs. You see, I don't know whether I'm ignorant, but I think the information is outside there. I had not actually looked for it. This circular actually compels the civil society organizations and the NGOs to report on climate finance flows within their organizations. I think this is one advocacy area that we can take advantage of as youths, so that we realize these particular policy frameworks. But I also agree in the multilateral arrangements on access to climate finance. We really need to adopt the principles of locally led adaptations, so that the climate finance in these sectors are actually so flexible to meet the needs of the youths and women at the grassroots. Because I think, as Mike has put it, why should we leave finance when there is all about mitigation, a lot of financing around mitigation, right? But Collins has also challenged him that, have you seen any private sector investing on adaptation, and one successful one, right? So I think we really need to take the discussion where it belongs. And I'm very happy that even young people are now taking center stage in the discussions around climate finance, but we really need to insist the principles of locally led adaptation, so that it is integrated in the discussions around climate finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As our speaker, yes, we should be mindful of time because we have one last round of questions. So, how do you? Yes.
Thank you so much. And I just want to start answering the young man that how can we help other youths access? I'll tell you this, my brother. Unless we work together, and because as an individual, you can never go to GCF and say that you want to be funded. You have to ensure that you work with a group or a consortium of young people that you're working together. And to repeat your point, my sister, trust me, young people, we are very competitive. I've been one of the most advocate person trying to ensure that we work together, and it's never, we always compete. Dolphin here has a very good, there's another group there that is fighting her, not just physically, but their resources are so minimal, and we have to access it. And that competition makes you make sure that you are an expert in your own craft. So competition is good for growth. But coming back to Collins, and he was not challenging me, he was posing a question to all of us. But I want to say this, governments are the only institutions that do not operate in meritocracy. And this is because they have to offer solutions to their people. And when it comes to adaptation, you have to ensure that the people survive. It's only mitigation that has an opportunity for business people to thrive so well. And business people cannot find it so well in the adaptation because there is no way to derive benefit out of that. Because businesses operate to create profit. And how are you going to create the indicators out, or how are you going to create measurable indicators out of adaptation that is going to sell to the private sector to enable them to come and invest, unless you put in a mitigation angle? Because for them to go and start doing disaster risk reduction projects, they have to ensure that at least what is the long-term benefit that we are going to derive profit. And no private sector is going to pump money, knowing very well that they are not going to get profit out of this initiative that are going to get. So it goes back to the government to invest in sectors that, even though they are going to run at a loss, it is their duty to ensure that their citizens survive. And that's why I said it is the role of the government to ensure that everything that they do ensures that the people their resilience is high enough whenever climate disasters strike. Because it's only a fool who may think that the government or private sector is going to invest much in adaptation, yet you know very well that they are not going to derive profit out of it.
Thank you very much, Haduyu. So in the interest of time, we'll take one last round of the panel, then we do our last Q&A. So I'll start with you. But before I go back there, because we've talked about issues of the private sector and issues of Article 6. So we know that Yungo is sort of the knowledge youth hub that we have. So I'd like our Yungo representative to elaborate to us, what is the linkages between, what is the relationship between climate finance and Article 6? And as she answers that and try to create a linkages from the youth perspective, because a youth will explain to to a youth in our youth language. I'll also come back to Isaac to also immediately after her, in the interest of time, to kindly elaborate to us, basically, Isaac. The Climate Change Act has introduced the 15% benefits to go to the society. How can young people leverage on that to ensure, especially at the grassroots level, because at the grassroots level, that 15% basically that has been the benefits supposed to go back to the communities, young people at the community, at the grassroots level, how can we leverage on that, basically? And also, as we conclude, of course, I'll ask Christine, basically, basically, we know that when it comes to issues of climate finance, you have the private sector finance and also the public sector finance. And we know that climate finance is in two forms, loans and grants. So if young people want climate finance, do you think national youth organizations are at a position where they can take a loan to support some of their climate change actions, basically? Because we know that most of the climate financing is in terms of loans, which is why we've been advocating we need more grants more than loans. So, and then I will conclude with Haduyu after Christine. So Haduyu, yours is cooking, so we'll start with Matilda. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so in simpler terms, climate finance refers to the funds that are required in addressing climate change, right? So when we're speaking of carbon markets and the linkages to climate finance, we're speaking of how we are taxing the people that are causing the most carbon emissions. In simpler terms, that is what we're basically talking about. So the linkage is that we are just seeking funds that those people that are causing the most climate emissions to pay up, because they have gone above the cap, and right now there isn't any funds yet that have been paid for the carbon emissions. And the problem now is that the global south is the most affected by these carbon emissions, and we emit the least. So you find a situation whereby it's $90 a ton for Africa and $10 for the people that are meeting the most emissions. So the linkages are that we're demanding that there's climate finance in this area. We're demanding for the funds for the cap that has already been reached. And the issue, there was also discussion on transparency. How do we ensure that there's transparency, that people are accountable to their actions, or people are accountable to what they promised? I think it's an issue of following up. After COP27, what did the young people do? Did they go back to ask, where is the money? Did you go back to ask, what did you do? Did you go back to ask, have you reduced the carbon emissions? I'll give an example of the Zimbabwe NDC. They said that they've increased their carbon cap from 33% to 40%. But as a young person from Zimbabwe, I'll just give in the context of Zimbabwe, have you engaged with the government in relation to what they promised? So I think it starts from holding people accountable. That is when they'll be able to keep their promises, and that is where we are able to have a clear linkage between climate finance, because we're going to continue having this conversation next year, the year after the next, COP27, COP28, COP29. But do we really want to reduce the emissions? And if we are reducing, the people have to pay the money, because if they don't, they'll continue doing it and there will be no action that is being taken. So that is our take on the linkage between climate finance and the carbon markets.
Thank you, Isaac. Christine, then I'll come to Haduyu.
Thank you. I know Colin's ears are out because he will say I'm going against the principles of climate justice. But let me spread knowledge around this. The revision around our Climate Change Act 2016 revolves around including carbon markets in our Climate Change Act, right? So that question is a very good question, because I think that's the direction the country is actually moving to, but also just ensuring that we align ourselves properly. One, the regulations will define clearly the benefit sharing strategy around the carbon offset projects that maybe the country will adopt. But the information that I want to give to us as young people is let's take advantage of the opportunities which are there to, one, acquaint ourselves with the knowledge around voluntary and compliance markets in carbon, but at the same time design projects that are having adaptation core benefits. so that we don't leave the opportunities that Mike Aduyu is talking about. The reason being that if most of our finances are actually addressing the aspects of mitigation, then why are we leaving those opportunities to go? Then let's be so much proactive in how we design our projects, so that we design mitigation projects with the adaptation core benefits, so that we align ourselves properly with the funding mechanisms which are existing. That would be my good statement to that. But I believe if we have proper legislative frameworks in place to manage even how the communities are going to benefit from the projects. The Climate Change Act is actually alluding to 15%. I think this is still subject to a lot of discussions that are going to come around the development of the regulations around carbon markets. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Christine. We know the question I asked, we know that, do you think national youth-led movements are ready to dive deep into climate finance? Because most of the climate finance in terms of loans, basically, we've seen countries just complaining, more debt, more debt, more debt. Yeah. So, Christine?
Okay, I'm going to start with facts. We are all impacted by climate change, yeah? Another fact is that the wealthy countries aren't immune to the impacts of climate crisis. And another fact is that in as much as they are not immune, then they also have the resources to respond and bounce back more quickly than low-income countries. We all know that, right? So when we come to talking about grants and loans, look, the low-income countries are being pushed every day to borrow money to adapt to the climate crisis, disasters, and this in turn keeps them digging deeper into debt. They're being pushed further and further into debt every single day. And according to the Bridgetown initiative, it says that the World Bank has different rates for the Global South and the Global North. The Global South rates are about 14%, and the North, the South is like 14%, the North is 1 to 4%. So how then do you expect us to pay the loan with that high rate, yeah, and also respond to climate crisis? So when it comes to transparency, as mentioned earlier, I think it's high time to be transparent enough as the people giving the loans. Tell the communities, tell the young people that, yes, we are giving loans, you will administer the initiatives, but at the cost, at an expense, yeah? That the private sector is making profit out of your misfortune. And then let community or the young people be the judge of, do we want to get it or not? And as one of my friends said, there's this reckless statement that has been going on that all of you have heard, yeah? We'd rather die in debt than die poor. So I think we need to restructure our financial systems. We need to go back to the why we started the systems. What's our goal? To alleviate poverty. But are we alleviating poverty and still creating more avenues for, people to remain poor so that we can, it's like a business, in short, yeah? So there's need to restructure the financial systems, institutions. We need to go back to Article 9, which gives us the framework of the flow of the finances. Who needs to give what, where, finances needs to come from the north to the south, and the public institutions are very key, as highlighted in the Paris Agreement. And I know that loans can be, something that would help, but can we also think about other creative avenues for giving out or supporting the Global South to be able to face the crisis? Can we not go to loans? Can we have grants? Can we have other avenues to young people in the community that are more sustainable than just offering loans at high rates that we definitely know that we will not be able to pay. And as young people, even accessing the loans is a problem. So that's my stand. We need to really think of what other avenues can we use to be able to offer our communities, young people, access to finances other than just loans, and be very transparent to the people that this is what it is and this is how either of the parties will benefit.
Thank you very much, Christine. As Hadu gives his last closing statement, because we are out of time, we're beyond our time. So Hadu, the FDB has launched a fund for young people and enterprises. How can African youth basically mobilize themselves, coordinate themselves to be able to access, of course, FDB's offer, which is, of course, in terms of looking to support enterprises and SMEs. So Hadu on that. Then we'll take 20 seconds each to just give your final closing statement, one sentence, very short sentence, and then we can wrap it there. Then we can always advance the discussions later on. So how do you? Because we are out of time.
Thank you so much. I speak very fast, but let me start by saying that there are only two ways to develop. Either you overtax your people or you overborrow. And when the president is talking about new financial architecture that is going to show that we borrow at a better rate, I think all Africans should align to that. I'm not a supporter of him, but at least he is speaking sense. Let's move forward. The second thing, FDB, how sure are we that the technologies that are being propagated or that are going to be funded by FDB are really Africans, endogenous, that have been developed by Africans and everything, and it's not an idea that is being pushed by somebody from the global north, funding another young person, everything to be done. We should fund our own endogenous project. So yes, we can access the financing, but we need to really engage them from the onset of the development of the measures themselves in terms of how do we regulate those things. Finally, as you go to COP, young people, let's not just know that COP is not the end of life. As you go, have your own objectives as a young person. Don't go with the objectives, the country position of your country, because you are not a negotiator. And if you're a negotiator, you're not going to change anything. Thank you.
Isaac, one last sentence, single sentence, closing.
Thank you.
Out of time.
And to me, I want to counteract Adu's message. We want young people to be negotiators. Thank you. And I started by saying the problems, some of the problems. And I want to give some potential solutions just to finalize. One, I talked about the issue of access in relation to capacity gaps. We would want to suggest that as young people, we need to see on how to enhance capacity on the modalities of the access to the finances that are available. Secondly, on the policy frameworks, we really need to work with our governments to tailor-make our policies align with the principles of locally led adaptations, so that we benefit from some of the solutions that we have. And then finally, let's work with our governments, both at the county level and also at the national level, to align and put ourselves in positions to shape the agenda around climate adaptation and also mitigation. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Christine, 20-second statement, and then
Thank you.
we'll finish with
Thank
Matilda.
you
20 seconds.
So much. My last words are, in where we're coming from, let's be youth-centric. Let's encourage young people. Let's have a whole program that enhances the agenda of youth engagement in the climate adaptation works. How do they access financing? Let's be there to mentor them. Like you said, there's a lot of competition, but also I have been mentored by some of the panelists here. So mentoring each other is very key in terms of, not you, in terms of encouraging young people to access these finances. And the last one, transparency. In all that we do, let's be transparent. Follow up on what it means if we have $3 trillion of adaptation finance. What does the loan come with? Do we want it? Do we want to ask questions before accessing it? And how do we access it and ensure that we are not being oppressed in the climate agenda? Thank you.
Thank you. Matilda, 20 seconds.
So my closing remarks would be youth should take action. So in our country, they say ukaona usavarirwe mado ne ministry ausati watanga kuita basa. Basically means that it's the ministry is not shutting doors on you, you're not doing anything. So make sure they hear you. Make them tired. Just know that you are there. They will respond. In Zimbabwe, we now in each ministry there are youth desks where we can go as young people and speak our voice. So take action. Let them know you're there. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity. In the interest of time, we thank the organizer, we thank the UNFCCC for the opportunity for the side event. Unfortunately, we can never conclude climate finance discussions because it's a very broad topic. I think we'll have more sessions post the summit, post the week, and then we can continue to engage. Thank you very much and have a good rest of the week. Yes.